Welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. This podcast is for secular progressive homeschoolers who are unapologetically reimagining education for their kids. I am your host, Ashley, and today we are going to talk about Juneteenth. What is it, why it matters, and how we can incorporate it into our secular progressive homeschooling spaces in a way that is honest and respectful and meaningful. Because Juneteenth is not just another holiday, and it's not just a day to barbecue. It is a freedom story. It is Black history. It is American history. And for Black families, it can hold a lot of emotion. Anything from joy and grief and pride and frustration and remembrance and celebration all at the same time. So today we're going to talk about what Juneteenth actually is and what it means to Black families and how homeschoolers can teach it and what allies should and should not do. So let's get into it. What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is celebrated on June 19th, and it marks the day in 1865 when Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, and they announced that enslaved Black people in Texas were free. But here's the part that matters, because this happened more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863. So 2 years after. So when we talk about Juneteenth, we are talking about delayed freedom. We are talking about the gap between a law being written and that law actually reaching people. And this was before telephones and text messages and emails and television. This is important for our kids to understand. A lot of us grew up learning a very simple version of slavery ending. We were told Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves and the Civil War ended, and then everyone just moved forward, and it was a very progressive time for Black Americans. But it's just not that easy or that clean, because freedom did have to be enforced. Freedom did have to be fought for. Freedom had to be protected. And even after slavery legally ended, Black people still faced violence and exploitation and segregation and stolen land and voter suppression and systems designed to limit their freedom that still has impact today in 2026. And this is why Juneteenth matters, and we can't allow history or people to erase the history of Juneteenth. It reminds us that freedom is just not a word. Freedom has to be real in people's everyday lives. So why Juneteenth matters to Black families? So for many Black families, Juneteenth is personal. It is about honoring ancestors who survived the unimaginable. It is about remembering people whose names we may never know, but whose lives made our lives possible. It is about celebrating Black resiliency and Black culture and Black family, Black joy and Black survival. And I want it to be understood that Juneteenth is not only about pain. Yes, the history is painful, and we cannot separate Juneteenth from slavery. We cannot separate it from racial violence or delayed justice. But Juneteenth is also about gathering. It is about food, and it is about music, and it is about elders telling stories, and it is about kids learning where they come from, and it's about community saying we are still here. Because for Black families, Juneteenth can be a reminder that our history does not begin and end with oppression, but our history includes resistance and people building things like churches and schools and businesses, and how we, as an oppressed community, still survived with mutual aid and building our neighborhoods and our art and our music and just the movements. And yes, our history does include joy. And that's something I really want you as progressive homeschoolers to really hold on to. Do not teach Black history as only trauma. Teach the struggle, yes, acknowledge it, but also teach the brilliance, teach the culture, teach to the organizing and the creativity and the ways Black people kept choosing life and community, even when this country tried to deny them both. So, what can secular progressive homeschoolers do? What can they teach? I think if we're here and we're listening, we are not, committed to teaching a sanitized textbook version of Juneteenth history. We know we don't need to skip hard topics because a curriculum company decided it was just too controversial. We want to tell the truth and we want to be honest with our kids. And Juneteenth gives us a powerful way to teach our kids about history, justice, power, and responsibility. And it helps our kids understand that a law can change before people's lives change. And freedom can still be declared, but also denied. And history is shaped by everyday people and not just the presidents. And that Black people in history were not passive during slavery or after emancipation, and we had celebration and grief happening simultaneously, and justice requires more than just good intentions. And that's why for us on this decolonized history journey, we need to teach it all. Because if we say we are raising kids who care about equity and critical thinking, truth and justice, then we have to give them history that supports that. And that does not mean be fear-based or have guilt or, that America, we want to lean away from the America is history, right? Nothing is perfect in this world. We want to teach the imperfections and we need to be honest. History that gives kids the tools to understand the world they live in and imagine is such a remarkable gift to give them. So how to teach Juneteenth to younger kids? For younger kids, you do not have to give every violent detail, but you also do not have to lie or water it down. You can say something like, Juneteenth is a holiday that remembers when enslaved Black people in Texas finally learned that they were free. And even though freedom had been announced earlier, it had not reached everyone yet. And Juneteenth is a day to remember that freedom matters and that Black families and communities keep going, building, and celebrating. And by phrasing or framing it this way, this is age appropriate and it's truthful. You can read picture books about Juneteenth. You can make a timeline. You can talk about what freedom means. You can listen to music by Black artists. You can cook together and talk about why food is part of cultural memory. And you can expand on that idea of cultural memory. You should attend local Juneteenth events and talk about why the event exists. And you can ask them questions to see where their thoughts are of what does freedom mean? Why is it important for people to know their history? How do families remember important days? What does it mean to celebrate and remember at the same time? And again, you keep it simple with the kids, but don't make it shallow and don't think that they're, too precious to learn about it. We're planting the seeds. So how do we do it with our older kids and our teens? I believe you can take the conversation deeper. This is where you have the big conversations. You could compare a couple of things, right? You can look at the Emancipation Proclamation and, compare it to Reconstruction or, Jim Crow laws and ask them what's the difference between being legally free and being treated as fully free? And why did enslavers in Texas continue slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation? Who benefits when people don't know their rights? Let's see, what else? Oh, and it's also a good time to talk about the difference between individual racism and systemic racism, because Juneteenth is not just about individual bad people. It's about systems. It's about laws and money, land, laboring, policing, education, and most of all, political power. And that does not mean we are trying to make kids feel guilty. It means we are helping them understand cause and effect. And understanding that people made choices and systems were built, but those same systems can be challenged. So what should allies do? So if you are a white progressive homeschooling parent or a non-Black parent raising kids with a justice-centered home education point of view, you should not be ignoring Juneteenth. And it's also something you should not be something you take over. Allyship around Juneteenth really does start with humility and it means like you're learning the history before you're trying to teach it. You're using resources created by Black historians and Black educators, Black authors, and going to Black museums. You're buying books from Black authors. You support Black-owned businesses and Black-led organizations. And you are respectfully attending Juneteenth. And this is the time for you to listen and learn more than you speak. And again, you need to make sure that Juneteenth and Black History Month are not the only times when Black history shows up in your homeschooling journey. And that is a big one, because if your kids only know the same Black people, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, then Black history is being treated like a unit study instead of like a full part of the story. So you may have to audit your homeschool. You may need to look at your bookshelves. You may need to look at your lesson plans or however you organize and see if Black authors are present all year round. And are Black scientists and artists and activists and inventors, farmers, poets, and, everyday families included in your learning? And also understanding that Black history existed way before slavery. And are you teaching Reconstruction after slavery? Are you teaching Black joy and not just Black pain? Are you willing to correct another adult when they say something harmful? Because allyship is not just what you teach your kids privately. It's also what you're willing to challenge publicly. So what should allies not do? Do not make Juneteenth about your guilt. Black families do not need your emotional processing to be the center of the holiday. And don't say, I had no idea, and stop there. Learning should lead to actions. Those I don't know, I had no idea should light your butt on fire to lead you to action. And do not ask your Black friends or family members to explain Juneteenth to you when there is Google, there are books, there's museums, there's articles, there's documentaries, and there are Black educators online, I'm sure on YouTube University, that are already doing that work. So do not turn Juneteenth into this like cute crafting moment with no context. The craft in itself is not the problem, but the lack of history and explanation is the problem. And I feel so bad that I have to say this in 2026. Do not have your kids role play slavery. Do not make your kid pretend, or like in your community, pretend to be enslaved or enslavers. It's harmful, it's unnecessary, it's dumb. And don't make the Black kids in your co-op or the Black families in your community responsible for teaching everyone else. And don't treat Juneteenth like a diversity checkbox. Like, ooh, we did one diverse thing. There's more work to it. And if you're in a community that chooses not to acknowledge Juneteenth, or they're leaning on the we're not political or we don't do politics, if they're uncomfortable with Juneteenth, then that is political and it needs to be addressed. And if someone says, like, why do we have to talk about race? Why is race always a thing? And this is your time to shine, allies. This is time for you to speak up and say something. Remember, we've talked about this a few episodes back. We don't need any more kind white people. Get ruthless. And if a Black parent says something caused harm, allies should not rush to defend, explain, or minimize, or ask for endless proof. You really need to listen, you need to take it seriously, and you need to repair it, because that is what allyship looks like in real time and in real life. And I don't mind sharing that work here. And I think white people in Black space is always going to cause harm, but you need to be aware of yourself in those spaces. Simple ways to incorporate Juneteenth into your homeschooling experience. I want to offer you guys some ways to incorporate Juneteenth without making it performative. So create a Juneteenth timeline. You start with slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War, the General Order, number 3, the 13th Amendment, Reconstruction, and then connect it to the civil rights and today. Read some picture books, discuss them, choose books that center Black voices, and do more than just explain slavery. Study Galveston, Texas, and the ocean and what that meant. And since Juneteenth happened in Texas, I think this is a great way to bring geography and local history in connection, especially if you're a Texas homeschooler. Cook a meal together. Look up the history of certain foods, where they originated from, and what has been the cultural impact on them. Talk about how food carries memory, family, and culture, and discuss, how Juneteenth celebrates. Before you go, attend a local Juneteenth event, and before you go, explain what Juneteenth is and ask your kids what they noticed, what they learned, and what questions they still have. Have them write reflections. And if, you have older kids, ask them to write about what freedom means beyond the law. And I think if we're doing this, another thing is you can connect Juneteenth into your lessons, connected to slavery, Reconstruction, civil rights, voting rights, Black resistance, and modern, overall modern justice movements, because this is how we move when we're not trying to be a performative ally, that we really want to have real learning and experiences, and our kids to have the historical knowledge, because if you understand history, you understand the world. So why should this holiday be celebrated? Juneteenth should be celebrated because Black freedom matters. It should be celebrated because Black families carried this history long before it became a federal holiday. And it should be celebrated because kids deserve to know the truth, and that freedom delayed is still a part of American history. Americans made a choice, and they showed their character, and it needs to be discussed. And it should not be erased from history. They need to understand that joy is a part of resistance. And when we teach Juneteenth, we're not teaching kids to hate America. We are teaching them to tell the truth about it. And when we are teaching them that freedom has always required struggle, then they'll understand social movements when they get older. We are teaching them that people can survive injustice and still create culture and family and beauty and community, and they can live on. And we are teaching them that history is not just about something behind us, but it is something that shapes the world, and it impacts the world we are living in today, right now. And this is why we definitely need to do lessons. Even if you're on summer break, you still should have some point of education around Juneteenth happening, especially if you're homeschooling. And again, this shouldn't be like an add-on. Black history shouldn't be a one-day lesson, but as a part of a larger commitment to having or giving your kids access to an honest, inclusive, justice-centered education. So, here's my encouragement for this Juneteenth. I want you to honor your kids and your family and your commitment to homeschooling, to teach the history, to celebrate the joy, to respect what this day means to Black families. Do not center yourself if you're an ally. Do not just stop at a craft or a post. Let Juneteenth push your homeschool to be more honest and more thoughtful and more committed to justice all year round. This has been the Secular Homeschool Revolution. Again, this is a podcast for secular, progressive homeschoolers who are reimagining education for their kids unapologetically. And if this episode helped you think about Juneteenth differently or motivated you to incorporate it, please share it with another homeschooling parent or in a social media group. Leave a review on wherever you listen, whatever platform you listen to. And keep building the kind of education our kids deserve, because that is part of the revolution. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep telling the truth.